Lucio's words lingered in the air, gentle yet firm, as he told Rhea to make herself at home. He confessed that he truly liked having her there and wanted her to remain with them from now on. The warmth of his tone struck deeper than she expected, leaving her standing still, stunned, her thoughts echoing the unfamiliar phrase, "Make myself at home." Before the moment could settle, the Duchess's composed voice cut through the silence, reminding the children that they had duties to attend to. She urged them toward their afternoon lessons. Dana and Alan answered obediently and hurried off. The Duchess then informed Rhea that she would be stepping out for a while and entrusted the children to her care. Rhea responded with respectful urgency, assuring her she would watch over them. With a gentle wave, the Duchess departed, leaving the mansion quieter than before. Later, within the vast stillness of the library, Rhea busied herself arranging and dusting the bookshelves. The faint scent of parchment and polish filled the room as her thoughts churned. She could not understand him. He had rejected her so coldly before, yet now he spoke with kindness that left her heart unsteady. The contradiction weighed heavily on her, and she exhaled in frustration, deciding it was better not to dwell on something that only brought her headaches. As she continued her work, a slip of paper caught her eye among the stacked volumes. She paused, puzzled by its presence, and unfolded it carefully. Inside was a neat list of titles: Basic Etiquette for Nobility, Fundamentals of Imperial Protocol, the Peerage Directory, and the Tea Encyclopedia. Her eyes widened at the sheer scope of it. She wondered if Lucio had written it, noticing the meticulous notes added beside each book. The realization came quietly but firmly. If she were to accompany Dana to the palace more often, she must serve her properly. As the maid most trusted and loved by the young lady, she carried a responsibility that extended beyond simple chores. Her confusion softened into resolve. If this was Lucio's expectation, then she would rise to meet it. A small smile touched her lips as determination replaced uncertainty. Days passed in a steady rhythm of study and silence. The library became her refuge and her training ground. One afternoon, Alan and Rhea are both in the library studying. Rhea is focused and buried in books yet again. Alan spoke and remarked with blunt curiosity that she had been reading non-stop for days, questioning what could hold her interest for so long. His sigh suggested he expected no satisfying answer. Rhea looked at him, puzzled by his tone, unsure how to respond. Alan's gaze drifted to the titles spread before her. He read them silently. Basic Understanding of Magic and Spells, the Origin of Mana. His confusion deepened. Did she even understand what she was reading? And why was she studying an introduction to neighboring kingdoms? A faint unease stirred within him as a thought surfaced. Was she planning to leave for the Duchy of Valus? The quiet of the library was broken without warning when Alan abruptly pushed back his chair and rose to his feet, his sudden movement slicing through the stillness. His impatience spilled over with excitement about the Academy Festival beginning the next day. He could barely contain himself, already imagining the lively grounds, the decorations, the performances. He turned his enthusiasm toward Rhea, clearly expecting her to share in it. Rhea, however, only lifted her gaze briefly from the pages before her. Her acknowledgement was calm, almost absent-minded, before her eyes returned to the dense lines of text. Her mild reaction instantly dampened his excitement. Annoyance replaced his eagerness, and he muttered his dissatisfaction, criticizing her endless devotion to books. He insisted that reading was hardly something special, and reminded her that he, too, was perfectly capable of it. With a huff, he turned to leave. But before he could take more than a few steps, he paused. A faint breeze brushed against him. It was subtle but undeniable. Indoors, in a sealed library, there should have been no moving air. His brows furrowed as he slowly turned his head, scanning the towering shelves of books. His attention was fixed on a particular section of the shelves between bookcases. Something about it felt wrong, or perhaps something that he can't explain. Curiosity drew him closer. Before he could approach, Rhea appeared in front of him with startling speed, blocking his path. Her sudden presence made him recoil in shock. Moments ago, she had been seated quietly at the table, absorbed in her studies. Now she stood directly in his way. He questioned how she had moved so quickly, noting that she had seemed entirely focused on her lesson just seconds before. Without missing a beat, Rhea redirected his attention. She suggested that Diana's lesson must be ending soon and proposed that they go surprise her outside her room. The shift in subject was swift and deliberate. Alan, still flustered by her abrupt interference, reluctantly agreed and told her to step aside. Though confused, he allowed himself to be led away from the strange spot. As they walked, Rhea's thoughts raced beneath her composed expression. She realized how close he had come to discovering the hidden space behind the shelves. When she first arrived at the library, she had been too overwhelmed to notice it. Only after spending long hours organizing and studying in the library had she discovered the concealed area. In her old self, she would have investigated it secretly without hesitation. Curiosity would have driven her to uncover its purpose, but now, as a servant, she reminded herself that overstepping boundaries could bring consequences. She had chosen not to explore it, even though she knew of its existence. She did not know what the hidden space was used for, only that it must remain undisturbed. Her intervention had not been for herself. In her heart, she justified her actions as a way to protect the young master from something he might not yet be ready to uncover. She silently hoped he would not resent her for startling him. Beside her, Alan still appeared unsettled, muttering about her habit of sneaking up on people. The two of them continued down the long corridor together, the echo of their footsteps replacing the whisper of the hidden breeze left behind in the library. The next day, outside the duchy residence, the Duchess, with Rhea, stood with Alan and Diana as they prepared to depart. The carriage waited at the entrance while the Duke personally saw them off. The moment carried a quiet formality as they gathered and climbed inside. Once seated, Diana leaned toward the window and waved goodbye, calling out to her father that she was heading out. The Duke smiled and waved back, warmly acknowledging her farewell. Then his attention shifted. His gaze settled on Rhea. She noticed it immediately, startled by the sudden focus. With calm seriousness, the Duke reminded her to be careful. Rhea froze in surprise, flustered by the direct concern. She quickly composed herself and answered with a respectful affirmation. The carriage began to move, rolling forward as their journey started. The Duke remained where he stood, watching the carriage disappear into the distance. His thoughts lingered on Rhea, and in the quiet that followed, he resolved that he would make sure she had a place she could truly call home. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere shifted from quiet formality to growing excitement. Alan spoke eagerly about what they would do once they reached the academy, mentioning that they should ask Askal to demonstrate rainbow magic. He recalled how Askal used to create countless shimmering bubbles for him, a sight he had never forgotten. The name struck Rhea immediately. In her thoughts, she identified him as Askal Velis, the young duke and heir to the powerful Duchy of Velis, a man renowned for his striking appearance and often mentioned alongside Lucio. She remembered his lineage, the grandson of Marquis Diapel, guardian of the empire's borders, and more importantly, his reputation as one of the rare nobles who treated commoners with genuine respect rather than disdain. Alan began to continue speaking about Askal, but his words were cut short when the coachman announced their arrival at the academy. Excitement surged the moment they stepped out. Voices filled with amazement rose at the sight of the academy festival unfolding before them. Rhea observed the surroundings with quiet wonder. Though she had seen the place many times before, it appeared especially beautiful that day, adorned with festive energy and anticipation. The Duchess noted that they had arrived a little too early and were well ahead of the agreed time to meet Lucio. Alan responded that they could simply wait until he came out. Before the moment could settle, someone approached and addressed the Duchess, drawing Rhea's attention to the figure moving toward them. He introduced himself as Kenis Petit, mentioning that he had introduced himself at the last ball and asking if she remembered him. He added that he was a junior to Lord Lucio by 1 year. The name hit Rhea like a sudden chill. In her mind, shock surged as she recognized him, the very person who, in her past life, had framed her for theft. Kenneth then turned his attention to Diana, remarking that these must be Lord Lucio's younger siblings and noting that he had heard they were coming to the capital. Diana reacted with visible disgust. She abruptly ran toward Alan and clung to him, crying out that she did not like monsters. Kenneth stood startled by her reaction before awkwardly concluding that the young lady must be shy around strangers. A small stir in the air marked the arrival of several noble ladies approaching the Duchess, their voices bright with recognition as they called out to her. They explained that they had heard a commotion and came to see what was happening, expressing delight at seeing her again after some time. The Duchess greeted them warmly, and polite inquiries about each other's well-being quickly followed. One of the ladies suggested that they should not remain standing and proposed that they step aside for a proper chat while time allowed. The Duchess agreed, then turned to Alan with instructions. He was to wait there for his brother, and once Lucio arrived, they could begin looking around while she joined them later. At that moment, Kenneth stepped forward and offered to guide them to the most famous cafe along Academy Street. When the noble ladies and the Duchess departed, Alan gently reassured Diana that the strangers were gone and told her she could look up now. She hesitated, seeking confirmation, and only relaxed once he assured her they had truly left. He then instructed her to hide behind him if any strangers approached again. Almost instantly, her fear vanished as her attention shifted to the nearby juice stand. She pointed eagerly at a blue drink, insisting she wanted that one. Watching this sudden change, Rhea thought to herself how quickly Diana recovered. She then asked Alan and Diana to stay where they were while she went to purchase the drink so they would not miss the young master's arrival. Alan offered to give her money, but she assured him she would handle it, lifting 2 heavy money pouches in her hands. The sight stunned both children, who blurted out in amazement that she was rich. Taze then instructed Jack to accompany Rhea, and after a brief acknowledgement, Jack followed her as she headed toward the stand. At the juice stand, Rhea stepped forward to place their order, requesting 2 blue drinks and 1 each in red, green, and yellow. She also insisted that Jack choose one for himself, offering to pay for it. He hesitated at the unexpected kindness, then quietly placed a pouch of coins on the counter and suggested it be used for the payment, adding that he had no real need for money and that she could keep whatever remained. Rhea reacted with visible shock at his remark. She firmly rejected the idea, reminding him that no one could predict the future and that keeping money close brought peace of mind. With practical insistence, she returned the pouch to him and urged him to take it back. Jack, caught between confusion and mild embarrassment, muttered that she spoke like an old woman. The vendor gently intervened to stop the exchange, announcing that their drinks were ready. Rhea's expression softened into a bright smile as she thanked the seller and paid for the order. They began walking away with the drinks in hand. Jack remained quiet, lost in thought as they moved through the bustling Academy Street. Watching him, Rhea sensed he had not fully understood her words, yet she felt certain that treating money so lightly could become a serious problem. As they passed a fountain, Rhea suddenly stopped and directed Jack's attention toward it. He looked at the structure in confusion, unsure why they had paused. She explained that the angel statue at the fountain was a famous landmark, and that people believed tossing a coin there while making a wish could make it come true. Rhea stood before the fountain, watching the clear water ripple around the angel statue as people passed by, making quiet wishes of their own. In her thoughts, she reflected that Jack did not seem like someone who believed in such things, and she admitted to herself that his skepticism was probably the wiser way to live. The memory of her past life surfaced unbidden, bringing with it the image of a younger, more desperate self kneeling before a similar fountain, wishing for simple comforts, food for the day, warmth for the night, and someone who would ask if she was all right when she was hurting. Back then, she had not known how to doubt legends or question hope. She had wished earnestly, then stopped herself, dismissing those old pleas as meaningless before narrowing her desire to a single, heartfelt longing. Yet even that had faltered when she realized she possessed no coin to toss, and so she believed her wish could never reach whatever power listened to such prayers. As she lingered in that thought, a voice suddenly sounded behind her, offering a coin, Startled, she turned to see Lucio standing there holding out a gold coin. He instructed her to toss it into the fountain and make a wish. Shock washed over her at the sight of such a valuable piece of money being offered so casually. She protested that it was far too much, but he insisted she take it. Still stunned, she accepted the coin with hesitant fingers and immediately tossed it into the water. As the gold disappeared beneath the surface, she could not help thinking that such money could have bought her full meals or a warm place to sleep. Yet, despite that thought, she closed her eyes and prayed again. Not for comfort this time, but for something deeper. Whether parents, siblings, or even a distant relative, she wished with all her heart to find her family. The moment passed, and reality returned when Jack's voice broke the silence, asking if she wanted to try making a wish as well. She blinked, startled back into the present, and dismissed the idea as mere superstition. Urging that they hurry because the others must be waiting, she resumed walking. Inwardly, however, she carried a quiet resignation. Even after tossing an entire gold coin, her wish had never come true. Behind her, Jack lingered for a moment, lost in thought. He glanced back at the fountain, the rippling water reflecting the sky above, and silently considered the idea of a wish. Alan's voice cut through the bustle the moment Rhea and Jack returned, demanding to know why they had taken so long. Rhea apologized, explaining that they had arrived later than intended, but Alan protested dramatically, insisting it was far beyond a small delay and that she ought to feel ashamed. Instead of arguing, Rhea offered the drinks she carried and urged him to try one first. His irritation vanished the instant he tasted it, replaced by a bright smile as he declared it delicious. Only then did Rhea notice Lucio standing nearby. With careful politeness, she extended a blue drink toward him and recommended it as especially refreshing. Lucio did not react. He simply turned away and stated that they were short on time and should proceed to the academy. Alan quickly moved to follow, urging his brother to go together. Rhea remained where she stood, left holding the untouched drink. In her thoughts, she reasoned that to someone like Lucio, such a simple refreshment must seem trivial. Still, she had wanted to thank him using the small savings she had carefully set aside. Her thoughts were interrupted when Jack suddenly took the drink from her hands. Startled, she protested that he had not even finished the one she had already given him and warned he would get a stomachache if he drank so much. Blushing but determined, Jack insisted he could finish them both, gripping the 2 cups firmly. Rhea relented, expressing quiet gratitude for his thoughtfulness. With that, they set off together toward the academy. Inside the academy grounds, Rhea slowed her steps as the lively scene unfolded before her. Students in neat uniforms passed in groups, laughter and chatter drifting through the air, while banners and decorations swayed gently above the wide stone paths. Her attention was captured by a towering statue at the center of the courtyard, and she stood before it in quiet amazement, thinking how different the academy felt from what she had imagined from the outside. The place seemed grand, vibrant, and full of life. Her thoughts were interrupted when Diana looked at her with puffy eyes and pointed curiously toward Rhea's bag. In response, Rhea opened it and revealed bracelets and necklaces, explaining that they were nothing special. She reflected inwardly that she had been delayed earlier because she stopped to buy them along the way. Alan examined one and immediately criticized its cheap appearance, remarking that she had bought too many and should have chosen fewer, better items. Rhea quickly snatched the piece back and insisted she was prioritizing quantity over quality. When Alan questioned whether she truly liked such things, she answered simply that she did. Privately, she avoided explaining further, knowing that revealing the truth would expose her intentions. The items were meant to serve as seed money for a small business she hoped to start. At that moment, Rhea noticed Diana's expression soften into a hopeful, almost pleading look. Understanding the silent request, she gently offered to place a bracelet on Diana's wrist. Diana hesitated, asking whether it belonged to Rhea, but Rhea reassured her that it was meant for her and encouraged her to hold out her hand. As Rhea carefully fastened the bracelet, the string suddenly snapped. Beads scattered across the ground, bouncing over the stone pavement. Both Rhea and Diana froze in shock at the unexpected break. Ria immediately apologized and knelt down to gather the fallen beads, asking for a moment to fix the situation. As she collected each tiny piece, she sighed inwardly, realizing the bracelet had likely broken so easily because of its poor quality. Despite that, she could not ignore the fact that she had spent all her money on these items. As Ria knelt on the academy courtyard stones gathering the scattered beads, a hand suddenly entered her view and lifted one from the ground. The young man returned the bead to her, prompting gratitude from Ria. Her thanks halted mid-motion when she finally looked up and saw the student before her. He urged her to take it, and the moment stretched as Ria stared in stunned silence. In her mind, she could only register his striking appearance, as if he were a radiant presence standing under the festival light. A faint blush crept across her face while she struggled to respond. He studied her briefly and remarked that she looked young, asking if she was a student from the Gifted Academy. He then assumed she must be visiting for the festival and asked whether she had family there. The word lingered heavily in her thoughts. She hesitated, unsure how to answer, and began politely explaining that it was not exactly so. Before she could finish, a voice called from behind them. Ria turned toward the sound and saw Lucio approaching. He questioned what the young man was doing there. The two greeted one another with easy familiarity, and the young man responded with pleasant surprise at the sight of everyone. Ria sensed a subtle tension in the air and wondered whether they knew each other well. Alan's voice cut through the moment as he called out to Ria, telling her not to run off. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Lucio, then noticed the young man beside him and greeted him as well, calling him Brother Askal. The young man returned the greeting warmly. Ria's thoughts jolted in shock at the name. Realization struck. This was Askal Valus, heir to the Valus dukedom. He apologized for the late greeting and introduced himself properly. Before the moment could settle, Diana pointed at him with unfiltered delight, exclaiming at his handsomeness. He laughed lightly and accepted the praise with a smile. Diana and Ria enthusiastically signaled their approval, awarding him a perfect score with cheerful gestures. Alan stood speechless, already resigned to the predictable chaos that followed whenever people saw Askal's face. Lucio then spoke his name, drawing his attention at once. He remarked that Askal was usually locked away in the library and questioned why he was out walking today. Askal replied that the sunlight through the window had looked inviting, prompting him to take a walk for a change. Lucio responded that if he had finished walking, he should return, reminding him that he had no intention of joining the festival crowds and disliked crowded places. Ria stood quietly as the exchange between Lucio and Askal settled into an uneasy calm. In her thoughts, she wondered if Lucio's tone had sharpened out of protectiveness toward Diana, perhaps more than what would be expected between friends. Askal, sensing the atmosphere, excused himself and mentioned returning to the library. Before he could leave, he glanced at Ria. She noticed the look and, almost reflexively, asked about the academy library, wondering aloud if it was truly as vast as rumored. Askal's expression brightened. He confirmed that it was enormous and asked whether she liked books. Then he paused, realizing he did not know her name. Ria began to introduce herself, but Lucio spoke first, stating her name clearly. The sound of her name on his lips stopped her mid-breath. It was such a simple thing, yet it stirred memories she could not suppress. For an instant, fragments of another time surfaced. Lucio calling her name while holding her, urgency and emotion echoing in his voice. The present returned just as quickly. Askal repeated her name, committing it to memory. Seeing her interest, he offered to show her the academy library. He explained that outsiders were normally not allowed inside, but during the festival, guests could enter if accompanied by a student, and he pointed out the building nearby. Ria's heart raced at the rare opportunity. Though she knew it might be improper, the chance to see the Central Academy library was irresistible. Alan voiced his disbelief, remarking that she could not have come all the way to the festival just to visit a library, and he turned to Diana for support. Diana fell into deep thought before calmly giving Ria permission to go ahead. Ria froze in surprise. Alan protested, warning that if Diana said that, Ria would truly go. With shining eyes and barely contained excitement, Rhea promised she would return before the fireworks and urged them to enjoy themselves while she was gone. She waved enthusiastically and hurried off. Alan called after her, reminding her to be back before the fireworks. Lucio released a quiet sigh, thinking to himself that he had intended to give her a proper academy tour as his father requested, yet she had run off before he could. As Rhea disappeared into the crowd with a scowl, Alan and Jack began talking. Alan wondered aloud if Rhea had a preference for blonde men, noting that the young man she had just met also had blonde hair. Jack replied that if Alan meant the man they met at the gate, Rhea had not seemed to like him at all, and had even looked frightened. Lucio, who had been listening in silence, asked who they had encountered earlier. Alan answered that it was Kenneth Petit, the young heir of Count Petit. Lucio repeated the name under his breath, his expression tightening as recognition settled in. Inside the academy library, Rhea stepped into a space grander than anything she had imagined. Towering shelves stretched upward beneath arched ceilings, sunlight filtering through high windows and illuminating rows upon rows of books. The structure itself felt elegant and solemn, and the sheer size of it left her breathless. In her heart, she felt nothing but gratitude for having come. Askal noticed her wonder and asked if there was anywhere in particular she wished to see. Without hesitation, she expressed her desire to look at the magic books. He guided her toward his desk, explaining along the way that magic, at its core, was the act of forming and releasing a spell through mana-derived power. He described how understanding the formula was fundamental, and that spells were categorized by attributes such as fire and water, further divided into branches like offense, defense, summoning, and manipulation. Rhea listened carefully, but inwardly she felt unsettled. When she had learned magic from her master in the past, she had never heard it explained this way. While a few principles overlapped, much of what he described felt entirely new. Absorbed in his explanation, she failed to notice how close they had come to his desk and accidentally bumped into it, knocking several files to the floor. Startled, she immediately apologized and knelt to gather the scattered papers. Askal dismissed the mishap lightly, blaming himself for not organizing them properly. As she picked up the sheets, her eyes caught sight of intricate diagrams covering the pages. She remarked on the abundance and beauty of the magic circles drawn there. But then something unusual caught her attention. One particular formation seemed slightly off. She hesitated before speaking, then cautiously pointed out that the mana flow in one section appeared incorrect. Askal leaned closer and asked her to show him exactly where. She indicated the area, apologizing at once in case she had overstepped, admitting she did not truly know much. Askal studied the diagram carefully. After a moment, realization dawned on him. He acknowledged that she was right. Conflicting arrays had been placed side by side, which explained why the spell had refused to activate. Quickly, he began revising the formula, adjusting the structure with precise strokes. When he finished, satisfaction spread across his face as he declared that he had finally solved the problem that had troubled him for weeks. Rhea felt overwhelmed by his reaction, insisting she was simply glad to have helped in some small way. But Askal rejected the modesty, praising her intelligence and even her cuteness. In his excitement, he began to reach out as though to pat her head, then abruptly stopped himself and apologized for getting carried away. Rhea reassured him that she did not mind. She confessed that she liked the way he treated her, saying he felt like a real older brother. Askal's expression brightened at her words, but the joy faded almost as quickly. A shadow crossed his face as he admitted that he once had a younger sibling too, like Lucio, yet he had lost them before he ever truly had the chance to see their face. Rhea listened quietly as Askal spoke, and his words stirred an old memory within her. It had been a long time, yet she remembered the tragic incident connected to the Belus dukedom. In her previous life, she had only learned about it after she joined Terentium. Askal continued speaking, admitting that when he looked at Rhea, he kept thinking about the sibling he had lost. He corrected himself briefly, as though realizing the thought had started even earlier, perhaps from the moment he heard that Lucio's younger siblings would be visiting that day. He confessed that he had not wanted to encounter them, yet before he realized it, his feet had already carried him out of the library. To him, the whole situation felt almost ridiculous. He reflected on how things might have been different. If he had not lost that child, they might have grown into someone kind and clever, much like Ria. He added that the lost sibling would surely resent their family. Ria responded gently, revealing that she herself was an orphan. The statement caught Askal by surprise. She explained that because of that, she did not truly understand what it felt like to have parents or siblings. Yet she believed that if somewhere out there a member of her family was missing her, as deeply as he missed his sibling, she would feel happy rather than resentful. Her words visibly moved him. He admitted that hearing such a thought brought him comfort, and that perhaps, if he did not give up, he might one day find his sibling again. Ria affirmed that belief with quiet certainty. Grateful for her encouragement and for helping solve the magical problem that had troubled him for weeks, Askal offered to repay her. He told her to ask for anything she wished. If she were interested in magic, he even offered to formally invite her to the Bellis dukedom. He mentioned that the largest mage tower on the continent stood there and boldly claimed that, regardless of what imperial or kingdom mages might say, the mages of the Bellis dukedom operated on an entirely different level. Ria's thoughts raced at the opportunity. She knew well that the Bellis territory was famous for its advanced magical research. Realizing what such knowledge could mean, a spark of determination lit within her. She finally spoke, asking Askal for help with a problem she needed to solve. After Ria finished explaining everything, Askal considered her request carefully and repeated the core idea aloud, confirming that the mana had to be injected only into a specific object. Ria affirmed that this was correct and added another important condition. The mana must not affect the surrounding area at all. Askal thought about the requirement while Ria reflected silently. Not long ago, she had checked the research progress regarding splegia and had been shocked. She had expected that by now the researchers would have succeeded in studying its effects or cultivating it properly. Instead, nothing had improved since the day she first discovered it. Worse still, the mages were struggling with the very first step, warming the soil with mana. She reminded herself that it was not yet time for her to intervene directly. In the long term, the solution should come through the development of magic circles and artifacts. And now, by chance, she had met the perfect person to help at the perfect time. After thinking it through, Askal admitted that the task was a little tricky, but not impossible. Encouraged, Ria asked how she should modify the magic circle to create the artifact she had described, showing him the rough design she had drawn. She explained that it was still incomplete and that she was unsure whether she should fully explain its purpose. Askal studied the magic circle and summarized what he understood from it. That the design aimed to maintain the surrounding temperature while injecting only warm mana into the object. Ria was amazed. In her thoughts, she realized he had figured that out just by looking at the magic circle. Holding his pen, Askal then declared that he would help her. Night had fallen over the Academy Festival. Lucio stood with Diana, Alan, and the Duchess while they waited. The Duchess questioned where Ria had gone and with whom. Alan explained that she had gone to the library with Askal, complaining that while everyone else was enjoying the festival, she had chosen to visit somewhere so boring. The Duchess fell into silent thought. The name Askal Bellis weighed heavily on her mind. She had already been uneasy about Bianca's growing interest in Ria, and now the heir of the Bellis dukedom had taken notice as well. The possibility that Ria might one day leave their household crept into her thoughts, leaving her uncertain about what she should do. Her gaze drifted toward Diana as she worried quietly. Suddenly, Diana pointed ahead and excitedly called out that Ria was there. Ria was approaching with Askal, and the two of them were walking while holding hands. The moment Diana saw her, she ran forward and wrapped her arms around Ria, exclaiming how much she had missed her. Ria warmly returned the sentiment, telling her that she had missed her too. Askal then addressed the Duchess politely and announced that he would take his leave. The Duchess thanked him for the day. Before departing, Askal turned to Ria and told her that meeting her had been very pleasant, expressing his hope that they would meet again and reminding her not to forget what he had told her. Ria thanked him sincerely and wished him a safe journey home. Askal departed, and Alan stared after him in confusion, wondering if he had just seen the two of them holding hands or if he had imagined it. His attention then shifted to the items Ria was carrying, asking what she had brought back. Ria began to explain, but he interrupted before she could finish. He insisted that she should just admit that she regretted going to the library and that it must have been boring. Ria immediately denied it. With bright excitement and a wide smile, she said she had an incredible time. She explained that throughout the day she had kept thinking how glad she was that she had come to the academy, describing the experience as truly amazing. A short distance away, Lucio listened quietly to the conversation. His expression remained serious, and a faint sadness lingered in his gaze as he watched the scene unfold. As Ria stood among them, her thoughts returned to everything that had happened in the library. For nearly half the day, Askal had helped her construct a magic circle for the Splesia artifact. To her, that kind of guidance was something that could never be measured in money. She also realized that Askal had been right about something else. The magic of the Belus dukedom was far more advanced than that of the Empire. A quiet possibility formed in her mind. Perhaps in that place she could finally find answers about the magic she had learned in the past, and about the master who had taught her. Her thoughts were interrupted when Jack approached and asked what she had done in the library that made it so enjoyable. Ria explained that Askal had taught her many things about magic, and had even said he wanted to invite her to the Belus dukedom. The reaction was immediate. Jack and Alan both exclaimed in shock. Alan pressed her further, asking if she was really planning to go to the Belus dukedom. Confused by his sudden intensity, Ria asked what he meant, but Alan repeated the question directly, wanting to know whether she would actually go. Inside her mind, Ria admitted she did not yet know the answer. Entering the mage tower of the Belus dukedom would be an extraordinary opportunity, one she could not easily ignore. Yet she could not understand why Alan seemed so troubled by the idea. Before the moment could continue, Dinah tugged at Ria's dress with anxious urgency. She asked where Ria would go without her and pleaded for reassurance that she was not leaving. The worry in her voice was unmistakable. Ria looked down at her and gently addressed her. In her heart, she reflected that she had already abandoned the idea of leaving long ago, and now, more than ever, she could not bring herself to leave this child behind. She reassured Dana that she would never leave her. At that very moment, bright fireworks burst across the night sky. The Duchess looked up and announced that the fireworks had begun. Dana immediately grew excited and asked Ria to go closer with her to watch. Ria agreed, and they moved together toward a better view. A short distance away, Lucio remained standing apart, watching the scene in silence. His expression stayed serious, touched with quiet sadness, as he murmured the name of the place that had just been mentioned, the Belus dukedom. The night sky shimmered with bursts of color as everyone stood together watching the fireworks. Bright lights scattered across the darkness, drawing the attention of the crowd. Ria admired the display and excitedly pointed out how beautiful the fireworks were, suggesting they move slightly to the left for a better view. But when she turned to look at Dana, she noticed that the child still looked sad. Ria gently reminded her that she had already said she was not going anywhere. Dana hesitated, still worried, and tried to speak again. Ria teased her slightly, asking if she trusted that troublesome boy more than she trusted her. Dana quickly shook her head and insisted that she trusted Ria the most. Even so, she asked again for reassurance, wanting to hear clearly that Ria truly would not leave. Ria smiled warmly at her and reassured her once more, saying that there was no way she could leave when Diana was this adorable. At that moment, Ria noticed Lucio approaching them. Her thoughts halted the moment she saw him. Lucio seemed as though he was about to say something important. He began speaking, but before he could finish, the Duchess suddenly called out to him, interrupting his words. She reminded him that the fireworks had ended and questioned why he seemed distracted. The ball was about to begin, and she urged him to hurry. Lucio then said that he would escort them to the academy gates. Hearing this, Ria's thoughts drifted to the mention of the ball. In her previous life, such an event had been far beyond her reach. But this time would be different. She imagined a future where she would be wealthy enough to receive an invitation herself. If that happened, Lucio would have to attend as well, and the thought made her wonder who his partner for the dance would be. Her thoughts were suddenly broken by Alan shouting her name. Startled, Ria reacted in surprise while Dana instinctively clung to her protectively. Alan scolded her with strong concern, insisting that a man's looks were not everything and warning that chasing someone simply because he was handsome would only lead to regret. Inside her mind, Ria sighed at his persistence. He was still going on about the same topic. With playful stubbornness, she replied that she would still rather choose a handsome beggar than an ugly rich man. Alan was immediately shocked and demanded to know who had taught her something like that. As Alan continued questioning Ria about her strange statement, another voice suddenly spoke from nearby. Alan immediately turned toward the direction of the voice. The Duke had arrived. He looked around calmly and remarked that it seemed the festivities were already over, asking everyone if they had enjoyed themselves. The moment Ria saw him, her thoughts burst with excitement. In her mind, she recognized him instantly. A man who was both handsome and incredibly wealthy, just as expected of a duke. Alan, however, was still focused on Ria and continued calling out to her, trying to get her attention again. The Duchess stepped forward and asked the Duke what had brought him there. The Duke explained that he had come to pick them up since the area was becoming too crowded, suggesting that they should head back. The Duchess quickly agreed, realizing that the carriages would soon have difficulty passing through the crowd. She then turned to Lucio and thanked him for accompanying her and guiding her around the academy that day. Alan and Dana both said their farewells to him. Alan wished his older brother to take care, while Dinah sweetly said goodbye as well. Ria also stepped forward and politely told Lucio that she would be leaving now, too. As she turned to walk away, Lucio suddenly reached out and caught her hand, stopping her. He seemed about to say something important. Before he could continue, Ria quickly spoke first. She nervously explained that she had been studying hard, just as he had once instructed her to do. She went on to say that she visited the library every day and was following everything he had told her diligently. She assured him that she would take good care of Diana and asked him to trust her. In her mind, Ria believed that Lucio had simply wanted to check whether she had been following his instructions properly. She felt he must still be worried, and she sincerely wished that he would place his trust in her. Lucio fell silent for a moment, clearly taken aback by her words. After a brief pause, he simply responded and released her hand. Inside her thoughts, Ria reflected on how every previous encounter with Lucio had only shown him her most embarrassing sides. That had always bothered her. Yet now she felt that perhaps this moment marked the beginning of rebuilding the trust between them. With that small sense of relief, Ria climbed into the carriage to leave. Inside the carriage, the Duke suddenly commented on what he had just witnessed, pointing out the ridiculous expression someone had made earlier. The Duchess laughed in agreement, explaining that this was exactly what she had meant before. Sitting quietly with them, Ria felt confused and wondered in her mind if something amusing had happened that she had somehow missed. The carriage continued moving forward until it disappeared from sight. Back at the academy, Lucio remained standing where they had left him. A faint blush spread across his face as he reflected on the moment, quietly criticizing himself for how pathetic he felt. After a moment, he turned and walked back toward the academy library. Inside, Askal was still at his desk when Lucio approached him. Askal noticed his return immediately and asked why he had come back instead of going directly to the ball. He guessed that Lucio must have returned after seeing his family off. Lucio confirmed this with a simple response. Askal then began speaking about Lucio's siblings. He mentioned that although he had seen Alan several times since he was little, it had been his first time meeting Lucio's youngest sibling. He remarked on how much the child resembled Lucio, noting that the two looked almost exactly alike. Askal also commented that he had seen the Duchess again after a long time and observed that she had not changed at all. Thinking further, Askal added that he had not seen the Duke in many years and mentioned that he should probably visit and pay his respects soon. Lucio remained silent as he listened to everything Askal said. Finally, Lucio spoke, telling Askal to stop dwelling on these matters and return to his room. Askal apologized. Lucio began to walk away, but before he could leave, Askal called out to him. Lucio stopped and looked back. Askal then asked if he could come visit Lucio's house. Lucio responded with a small smile and refused. In the Bellis dukedom, the quiet corridors of the residence echoed softly with footsteps as Countess Bianca walked along, holding a letter in her hand. The envelope bore a familiar signature, Ria. As she looked at the name written on it, a thought crossed her mind. She had been worried before, wondering if asking Ria to write a letter might have been too difficult for her. Yet seeing the neat writing now made her realize that the girl could read and write perfectly well. In fact, Ria seemed even sharper than Bianca had expected. Curious, she opened the letter and began reading its contents. The very first line addressed her warmly as the most wonderful countess in the world. Bianca could not help but laugh softly at the affectionate greeting. Though Ria might be clever, that cheerful and exaggerated praise reminded her that the girl was still a child. Just then, footsteps approached from the corridor. A voice called out to her by name. Startled, Bianca turned at once and addressed the speaker respectfully, recognizing the presence of someone of royal status, and said, "Your Highness." Countess Bianca quickly composed herself after being startled and respectfully asked why Her Highness had come all the way out there. Her Highness explained that His Highness had encouraged her to take a walk, saying the weather was especially lovely that day. Bianca responded that it had been a good suggestion and politely offered to guide her if she was heading toward the garden. Before they could continue, Her Highness noticed the letter still in Bianca's hand and asked about it, mentioning that Bianca had been staring at it for quite some time earlier. Bianca lowered her gaze to the letter and casually explained that it was nothing serious, only a letter that had arrived from the Empire which she had been reading. Her Highness then asked if it had come from her father or from Askell. Bianca clarified that it had not. She went on to explain that during her recent visit to the Empire on business connected to Duke Ellard, she had met a child who had once taken care of a young lady at the orphanage. She had since learned that the Duke had taken that child in and that she was now working as a maid at the estate. Bianca described the girl as someone who seemed very kind and cheerful. Her Highness listened with interest and asked how old the child was. Bianca answered that the girl's exact birthday was unknown, but that she appeared to be around 9 years old. Hearing that, Her Highness expressed concern, remarking that the child sounded rather too young to already be working as a maid. She gently instructed Bianca that if the girl was struggling or ever needed help, they should make sure to assist her whenever necessary. Bianca smiled and assured her that there was no need to worry. Her Highness then made a quiet observation, remarking that Duke Ellard must truly be getting older, since for a man known to care only about his own family, doing something like this was rather unexpected. Time passed, and before long, the end of the season began to draw near. During that time, many things happened within the Ellard estate. But among them all, one piece of news stood above the rest. Thanks to Askell's help, the once stagnant research on Splesia cultivation suddenly advanced at remarkable speed. Ria knew exactly how much that changed everything. In her thoughts, she reflected on how the Duke had acknowledged her major role in the success of the cultivation project. Because of that contribution, he had significantly increased her share of the profits. With that, she was finally able to begin properly saving for her independence fund. Still, things were no longer as simple as they had once been. Since she had already decided to remain by Diana's side, she realized that her original life plan would need to be revised. There were still things she had secretly intended to invest in, and soon she would have to hand the Duke the list she had been preparing. But before any of that, there was one more task she needed to complete. She had to sell the mana stones. As she thought about them, her mind carefully reviewed everything she knew. Mana stones were normally mined from special locations where mana naturally gathered. Creating them artificially by injecting mana into ordinary gems was not considered common at all. Both aura, which swordsmen used, and mana, which mages relied on, originated from the mana stored within the heart. For mages especially, mana was as valuable as life itself. But she was different. She possessed an enormous amount of mana, and thanks to the training she had undergone in her previous life, she had complete confidence in her ability to control it. She still did not know why her mana capacity had increased so much, but whatever the reason, the result was undeniable. She had successfully transformed the gems she bought during the Academy Festival into real mana stones. Now the only thing left was to sell them. Of course, the process had not gone perfectly from the start. Since the gems she bought had been cheap, some of them shattered under the pressure of the mana they could not contain. But through repeated attempts, she had already learned how to manage the process more precisely. As she focused, she closed her eyes and quietly infused mana into the bracelet she was holding. The result was immediate. She could now create high-purity mana stones in an instant. That fact alone was enough to make her heart race. Since the Rockshuten Empire still relied heavily on the Belus dukedom for its supply of mana stones, she knew with certainty that releasing these onto the market would make her a fortune. There was only one problem left. She still had no idea how to sell them without revealing her identity. As Ria walked through the corridor, still deep in thought, a maid approached and called out to her. The maid explained that she had been on her way to fetch her because the Duchess of Peyront had just arrived and wanted her to come quickly. Ria immediately responded and hurried off. As she ran through the halls, a lighter thought replaced the one about mana stones. She found herself wondering what kind of interesting stories the Duchess of Peyront would share with her today. The Duchess of Peyront was no ordinary noblewoman. She was a princess from the kingdom of Tamba, a nation known as the Land of Deserts. Now married to Duke Peyront, the Empress's younger brother and the empire's prime minister, she had long lived in the capital. Even so, she was known for rarely appearing at social gatherings or noble events. A week earlier, the Duchess of Ellard had been deeply troubled while preparing invitations for her tea party. Most of the guest list had already been decided, but one name continued to worry her, the Duchess of Peyront. When Ria asked what was troubling her, the Duchess explained the situation. It was customary to send a family's symbolic flower together with a tea party invitation, but because this would be the first tea party she was hosting since coming to the capital, she had wanted to make the gesture more thoughtful. Rather than sending the same thing to everyone, she hoped to prepare flowers that suited each lady's individual tastes. The problem was that she had no idea what kind of flower would be appropriate for the Duchess of Peyront. Ria understood the concern immediately. In her mind, she reflected on how little public information there was about the Duchess of Peyront. Since she rarely attended banquets, and as the Prime Minister's wife, answered to no one socially, she remained an elusive figure. It was only natural that the Duchess of Ellard would feel uncertain. There was also a strong chance the invitation would simply be declined again. Even so, Ria hoped the Duchess would not be too disappointed. Then, remembering something, Ria suggested an unexpected answer: a cactus. The Duchess was visibly surprised by the suggestion and repeated it aloud. Ria then explained that since the Duchess of Peyront came from the Land of Deserts, she might appreciate seeing a plant that reminded her of her homeland. Inwardly, Ria remembered something else as well. In her previous life, the Duchess of Peyront had suffered deeply from homesickness and had eventually returned to her own country after divorcing. The Duchess of Ellard seemed struck by the idea. She gently patted Ria on the head and decided to prepare a cactus exactly as she had suggested, warmly calling her their lucky charm once again. And now, a week later, that decision had led to something unexpected. The Duchess of Peyront had actually come to the Ellard estate in person. Even more surprising, the very first thing she asked was whether it had truly been Ria's idea to send her that cactus. Caught off guard, Rhea was startled by the direct question. In her mind, she could not help but wonder what the woman's true intention was. But after a brief moment, she told herself not to overthink it and simply answer honestly. She admitted that yes, it really had been her idea. She then explained that one of her hobbies was reading travelogues and studying maps, and that she had happened to read a travelogue about the kingdom of Damba. The Duchess of Peyronte listened carefully. Inside her own thoughts, she had initially suspected that the cactus had been sent as a form of mockery, with a child merely being used as an excuse. But hearing Rhea's sincere explanation changed that impression completely. It became clear to her that the gesture had been genuine. With that understanding, she turned to the Duchess of Ellard and asked if she might return again the following day for another visit and a proper chat. The Duchess of Ellard accepted at once, saying she would be honored. The Duchess of Peyronte then added that if she came, she would bring some books from the kingdom with her. At that moment, the Duchess of Peyronte called for Rhea and greeted her. Rhea immediately greeted the Duchess with proper manners and respect. The Duchess of Peyronte responded by reminding her once again that there was no need to be so formal whenever she was in front of her. Beside her, the Duchess explained that she had come out personally because it was the young Lord of Peyronte's very first visit, and she thought it was only right to exchange proper greetings. The moment Rhea heard that, her attention immediately shifted. In her mind, she repeated the name of the young Lord of Peyronte, Aiden Peyronte. This was the very same young lord she had only ever heard about through rumors. And now, he was standing right in front of her. Rhea could not help but be amazed. Then, at his mother's prompting, Aiden quickly reacted. Startled for a moment, he bowed politely and introduced himself as Aiden of House Peyronte. The Duchess welcomed him warmly and thanked him for making the trip to visit. Not long after, the Duchess of Peyronte looked around and noticed that the young lady was nowhere to be seen. She asked whether the child was already waiting inside, but the Duchess explained that, unfortunately, the little lady had run off to the back garden just a moment ago. Hearing that, Rhea immediately offered to go and bring her back. The Duchess then turned the situation into a casual opportunity and suggested that, since they were already there, perhaps the young lord would like to head to the garden as well. Aiden was visibly caught off guard by the sudden suggestion. Before he could even properly refuse, the Duchess of Peyronte smoothly added that it would probably be much easier for children to get close through playing together rather than forcing a stiff and awkward first meeting. The Duchess agreed with that reasoning at once, saying that was simply how children were. Aiden looked completely overwhelmed by how quickly the adults had already decided everything for him. Still, under his mother's quiet pressure, he had no choice. And so, with a reluctant response, Aiden obediently agreed and prepared to follow. Rhea led the way and brought the young lord to the garden, politely telling him that they had arrived and that he could go on ahead. But the moment Aiden was left there, his thoughts immediately turned sour. In his mind, he mocked the whole idea of getting close by playing together. To him, it all sounded ridiculous. He had no interest in making friends in the first place. And judging by the situation, he assumed the young lady had probably run off because she did not want to play with him either. Still, he tried to figure out where he was supposed to go and began calling out, asking which direction he should take to find her. But when he looked around, he realized Rhea had already left him there by himself. That only made him more irritated. He could not help but complain inwardly about how rude it was for a guest to be treated like that, even if the one involved was only a child. Then suddenly, he heard a strange sound. Aiden immediately froze. He looked around in alarm, startled by the unexpected noise, and began trying to figure out where it had come from. Then, when he slowly lifted his eyes upward, he saw someone in the tree. It was Dana. From above, Dana noticed him too and cautiously asked who was there. The moment Aiden saw her clearly, he completely froze. His face instantly turned red. Before he could even properly react, the scene shifted elsewhere as Rhea began searching for Diana. She called out for her anxiously, wondering where she had hidden herself this time. She even muttered that Dinah had hidden so well that she could not find her anywhere. But then, Rhea suddenly spotted the scene in front of her and was immediately shocked. There was Dinah, on top of Aiden. Dana, sounding distressed, called out to Rhea and referred to the boy while sniffling, clearly unsettled by what had just happened. The moment Rhea saw the situation, panic immediately set in. Her first thought was that Dinah might have fallen from the tree. She rushed over in alarm and immediately began checking if Dana was hurt anywhere, while also anxiously asking if the young lord was all right too. But Aiden was barely processing anything at all. Still frozen and completely out of his senses, he could only stare and murmur one thing in complete disbelief. To him, Dana looked like a fairy. And then, without warning, Aiden suddenly got a nosebleed. Rhea was instantly thrown into full panic. Rhea carefully cleaned Aiden's nose and gently checked on him, asking if the pain had eased even a little after the nosebleed. But instead of answering normally, Aiden asked something unexpected. He hesitated, then questioned whether it was really all right for her to touch his face like that. Rhea was confused at first and did not immediately understand what he meant. But the moment it clicked, she was suddenly horrified. She immediately pulled back and apologized in a panic, realizing that she had touched the young lord's face so casually and fearing that she had acted far too boldly. But Aiden quickly tried to stop her. He explained that it was not about that at all. What truly bothered him was his skin color. With uncertainty and quiet pain, he asked whether it made her uncomfortable. Rhea answered without hesitation. To her, it was not at all uncomfortable. In fact, she told him that it looked lovely. She even said that he was very handsome. That answer visibly caught Aiden off guard. He looked at her and asked again, almost as if he needed to hear it one more time to believe it. And Rhea firmly reassured him. Without a doubt, she said. He was handsome, and even looked just like the Duchess of Peyront. Then, after saying that, she asked him something important. Did he perhaps dislike his mother's skin color too? That question struck Aiden immediately. He denied it at once. To him, his mother was the most beautiful person in the whole world. And the moment those feelings spilled out, Aiden suddenly burst into tears. Seeing that, Rhea immediately pulled him into a comforting embrace and gently soothed him, trying to calm him down. But while she held him, her own thoughts began to stir. In her past life, she never would have imagined seeing Aiden like this. The boy crying in front of her now was someone who, in the future, would become one of the Empire's 3 great knights, standing alongside Alan and Jack. That was the kind of person Aiden was destined to become. And not only that, he was also known as the devoted admirer who would one day fall in love with Dana at first sight. Originally, Aiden and Dana were never supposed to meet for another 5 years. But in this life, because of the changes brought by the Duchess of Peyront and by Rhea herself, everything had already started shifting. And little by little, the future was no longer unfolding the way it once had. Then, just as Aiden was still crying, Dana suddenly pointed a finger at him and called him a crybaby. Her expression immediately turned fierce as she angrily demanded that he stop crying and get away from Rhea, insisting that he stay away from her sister. Aiden instantly stiffened in shock and fear. Flustered and panicked, he hurriedly apologized to Dana, correcting himself mid-sentence and addressing her properly as the Lady of Ellard. Dinah only responded with a stubborn huff, clearly still displeased. Watching the two of them, Rhea could not help but think to herself that the young lord was still just a baby too. Then, trying to comfort him, she gently patted Aiden on the head and praised him for being brave, saying that he had endured getting hurt without crying. But the moment she did it, Rhea suddenly realized what she had done and immediately apologized again, worried that she had touched him too casually without thinking. This time, however, Aiden stopped her right away. Rather than rejecting it, he shyly admitted that he did not mind at all. In fact, he quietly said that if she wanted, she could keep patting his head. The moment Dinah heard that, she became annoyed all over again. Determined not to lose, she immediately declared that she would be the one to pat his head instead. Aiden was visibly startled by that sudden outburst. But Dinah, still stubborn and puffed up with emotion, kept pressing him, demanding that he stop crying already and asking if he was going to do as she said. Faced with her fierce little glare, Aiden had no choice but to agree obediently. Watching the scene unfold, Rhea found herself thinking that perhaps, unlike in the previous life, the two of them might truly become good friends this time. And as it turned out, that thought was not wrong. After the nosebleed incident, Aiden began visiting the duchy often, and just as Rhea had expected, he and Dinah gradually grew very close. Time passed, and on one of those days, while Rhea was quietly reading, Aiden came rushing in and called out to her brightly, addressing her as sister. Aiden eagerly asked if, now that she was done reading, they could finally play together. Rhea agreed right away and suggested that they play house, knowing it was something the young lord especially liked. That immediately excited Aiden. Turning to Dana, he asked if this time he could finally be the daddy. Dana was caught off guard by the sudden request. Aiden quickly explained himself, saying that he was always made to play the baby, and this time he wanted to be the husband too. But the moment those words left his mouth, someone nearby heard everything. Hidden up in a tree, Alan had been close enough to catch every single word. And the instant he heard Aiden mention being a husband, he was completely thrown into outrage. Without another second of restraint, Alan burst out from his hiding place in total fury and demanded to know what exactly Aiden had just said. The word husband had clearly struck him like lightning. Aiden was immediately startled by Alan's sudden appearance, but Alan was already too worked up to stop. Pointing straight at Aiden, he furiously accused the younger boy of already realizing just how pretty Dinah was. Dinah, completely siding with the emotional chaos, puffed herself up and boldly declared that Aiden could never be Rhea's husband. Instead, she insisted that she would be the daddy. And as if to prove it, she immediately clung to Rhea in a protective hug. That only made Alan even more confused. He froze for a second, trying to process what exactly was happening. Then Rhea calmly stepped in and explained the misunderstanding. She told Alan that, in their game, the role of the mother was not meant for Dinah at all. That role was for her. The moment Alan understood that, his entire reaction shifted. Realizing he had misunderstood the situation, he awkwardly calmed down and muttered in relief, asking if that was all it meant. Then, without missing a beat, Rhea smoothly turned the situation around and asked Alan if, now that everything had been cleared up, he would like to play the daddy role instead. Alan was completely caught off guard. Before he could even properly respond, Rhea handed the children off to him and casually announced that she would leave them in his care for the moment because she needed to step away for a bit. That only threw Alan into fresh panic. Completely unprepared, he immediately protested and demanded to know where she thought she was going while leaving him behind like that. And just like that, Alan found himself dragged straight into the game whether he liked it or not. As Rhea walked through the corridor, her thoughts were already elsewhere. In her mind, she felt that things had worked out well. There was something she had been meaning to discuss with the Duke for quite some time, but lately, everything had been so busy that she had not even had the chance to properly see him. So with that in mind, she headed toward the Duke's room. But before she could even knock, the Duke's door suddenly opened. The moment she saw him, Rhea immediately called out to him and hurried over. The Duke looked surprised to see her there and asked what had brought her all the way to him. He also asked where Dinah was. Rhea quickly explained that Dinah was currently with young Lord Alan, then asked if he was already on his way to the Imperial Palace. The Duke replied that he was not leaving just yet, and then turned the question back to her, asking if she had come specifically to see him. Rhea admitted that she had. There was something she wanted to tell him. Then, after gathering herself, she finally brought up the real reason she had come. She asked if it would be all right for her to go out this weekend. The Duke paused at that and repeated the word "go out," clearly caught by the request. Then, a few days later, it was finally time. Rhea cheerfully said her goodbyes, telling Dinah that she would be off now and reminding her to have a safe trip to the Imperial Palace that day as well. Dinah, though clearly reluctant to part, still wished her a safe trip in return. Nearby, Jack informed Rhea that the carriage was already prepared and ready to depart, telling her it was time to get on. Rhea answered at once and hurried over, telling Jack she was coming. But as she climbed into the carriage, her thoughts drifted back to the day she had asked the Duke for permission. At that time, she had explained that the weekend would be her day off, and that she thought it would be all right to go out, since everyone in the family would be attending the imperial banquet anyway. The Duke had answered simply and directly. He told her that her day off was her own time, and if she wanted to go out, then she should. That answer had immediately filled Rhea with relief and gratitude, and she had thanked him wholeheartedly. Now, back in the present, as the carriage prepared to leave, Rhea thought to herself with firm determination. This weekend was not only her day off, it was also the very same day that the entire ducal family would be away at the imperial banquet, which meant it was the perfect opportunity, the perfect chance to finally sell off the mana stones. Her resolve burned brightly inside her. As the carriage began to move forward, Dinah waved goodbye to her. Rhea waved back as well, and in her heart, she made a determined promise. She would definitely come back rich. When Rhea and Jack finally arrived in the capital, Rhea could not hide her reaction. She looked around in amazement and exclaimed at the sight of the capital before her. But behind that excitement, her true thoughts were far deeper. In her mind, she quietly thought about how long it had been since she had last seen this place. Beside her, Jack noticed the things she was carrying and immediately pointed it out, saying she looked more like a peddler than someone simply going out. Rhea casually explained that she had packed all kinds of things just in case, an umbrella, an extra layer, and other small necessities she thought might be useful. Jack then realized that when it came down to it, this was really Rhea's first time properly looking around the capital. Rhea responded a little awkwardly and agreed. Hearing that, Jack naturally took the lead. Since he had come there before, he told her that he would show her around. He even mentioned that he knew the plaza and a few decent restaurants in the area. But as she listened, Rhea kept her real thoughts to herself. In her mind, she admitted that she already knew every corner of the capital's back alleys. Still, because Jack looked so oddly excited about guiding her, she decided it might be better to simply go along with it. Jack continued, mentioning that there was also a dessert cafe nearby, one especially famous for the chocolate she liked. But just then, Rhea suddenly noticed someone in the crowd. The moment her eyes landed on that familiar figure, she froze. Her thoughts came to a sudden halt. In her mind, disbelief rose immediately. That person looked so familiar that she could hardly believe what she was seeing. Then Jack called out to her. Rhea snapped out of it at once and turned toward him, startled. Jack asked what was wrong, pointing out that he had been calling her, but she had simply stood there, spacing out. Rhea quickly brushed it off. She told him it was nothing, and explained that she had only thought she saw someone she knew passing by. Jack repeated that in surprise, clearly curious about who she could possibly know there. But instead of answering, Rhea immediately changed the subject. Rather than dwell on it, she brought up something much more urgent: food. She asked Jack if he was hungry too, saying that she wanted to eat first. Jack accepted the change in topic without pushing further. He agreed at once and told her that if that was the case, then they should go. He said he knew a decent place to eat, and after that they could also stop by the dessert cafe famous for the chocolate she liked. They could take their time. That instantly brightened Rhea's mood again. With a smile, she happily thanked Jack. The restaurant staff politely saw them off and wished them a good day as Rhea and Jack stepped back outside. Once they were walking through the streets again, Rhea happily looked over and remarked that the meal had been really good. Jack agreed and added that even the owner had been kind. As they continued down the street, Rhea suddenly asked if there was anything else Jack needed to do while they were already out. Jack repeated the question, not immediately understanding what she meant. Rhea then started listing things as if she had already mapped everything out in her head. She pointed out that the bookstore was on the other side, that if he wanted snacks, they should head right, and that there were plenty of interesting things to see if they went left. That immediately made Jack stop. Confused, he asked her to wait a second. Then, after thinking for a moment, he remembered something and mentioned that, now that he thought about it, he probably should take a look at some swords. The moment Rhea heard that, she reacted right away. If it was swords he needed, she said she knew a really good weapon shop. That answer made Jack pause again. This time he looked at her more seriously and called her name. Rhea responded casually, but Jack finally asked what had clearly been bothering him. How did she know the capital so well? He could understand her knowing about bookstores and restaurants, but a weapon shop? That was harder to explain. Caught off guard, Rhea hesitated. Then she quickly came up with an excuse, saying that she had just been really looking forward to coming out that day, so she had studied everything in advance. Jack accepted that explanation and pointed out that it did make sense, especially since she had been the one to come find him first and ask to go out. Hearing that, Rhea quietly realized in her mind that he was letting it go. Then, before the conversation could linger any longer, she immediately redirected his attention. She pointed out the sign farther back and told him that the place was right there. Jack, however, said he had not actually been planning to buy anything that day. According to him, the swords issued to them were not bad anyway. The moment Rhea heard that, she was genuinely confused. Issued swords? Then, almost as if she could not believe what she was hearing, she immediately pushed him toward the point she was trying to make. She reminded him that he was not a page anymore. He was an apprentice knight. And if he truly intended to become a full-fledged knight one day, then he could not keep going around without a sword that properly fit his hand. She urged him to at least put down a deposit that day, then come back later with that vice-captain uncle and buy it properly. Jack hesitated, saying it felt like a bit much and that he had already brought enough money with him. But Rhea would not let him retreat so easily. She insisted that he should at least give the old man a chance to act like a father for once. Then, before he could protest any further, she firmly told him to go inside and take his time looking around. That only made Jack even more suspicious. He immediately asked if she was not coming in with him and wanted to know where she was planning to go instead. Rhea simply smiled, and with that bright, innocent expression, she told him that she was going to buy some cake. As Rhea made her way through the streets and finally reached her destination, a large pastry shop came into view. The moment she stepped inside, a staff member greeted her warmly and asked what she would like to order. But Rhea had not come for anything displayed in the shop. She explained that what she wanted was not on display and that she would need to place a special order. When the staff member replied that they did not accept custom orders, Rhea calmly revealed what she truly wanted: mint chocolate cake. Then, in the palm of her hand, she presented a mana stone and asked if she could use that as payment. The moment the staff member saw it, the atmosphere changed completely. Without another word of refusal, the staff member immediately told her to come this way and personally guided her deeper inside. As she followed, Rhea quietly reflected that it would have been disappointing if they had dismissed the stone as a cheap gem. Fortunately, they knew quality when they saw it. But of course, that was not the real reason she had come. The pastry shop was only a front. In truth, this place was the information guild known as Daryl. Among all the information guilds in the Empire, the greatest of them all was Terentium. But Daryl stood right behind it in power and influence. Like Terentium, its leader remained hidden in mystery. However, Daryl specialized in social information and commerce, and more importantly, it secretly operated its own merchant company. For someone like Rhea, who needed to conduct business quietly and hide her identity, there was no better place to bring her proposal. Soon, the staff led her all the way to a large door and informed her that the guildmaster was waiting inside. Once she entered, Rhea handed over the mana stone. The guildmaster examined it carefully, and although the outside looked rough and low-grade, he could immediately sense the truth hidden within it. The mana contained inside was powerful and of astonishingly high quality, so refined that it could rival even the finest mana stones from the Belus dukedom. And even more alarming was the overwhelming wave of mana coming from such a small child standing before him. Unable to ignore it, he directly asked if she had infused mana into those stones herself. Rhea answered without hesitation. She confirmed that she had made them herself, and she made it clear that she had not come there seeking information. She had come to make a deal. Then she laid out her proposal plainly. For 6 months, she would supply mana stones exclusively to that place. In exchange, they would sell them through Delhi's merchant company, and she would receive half of the profits, fees included. The guildmaster was stunned. A child had entered using a password that, at present, only one person in the imperial family knew. That same child was now offering mana stones of extraordinary quality and boldly proposing a business contract, as if she had done this many times before. It was far beyond anything he had expected. Still, there was one thing he could not ignore. He asked how she even knew about Dellis Merchant Company, but Rhea had no interest in explaining herself any further. She cut through the question immediately and told him that enough was enough. What mattered now was simple. Would he sign a contract with her or not? She reminded him that she was busy and demanded a quick answer. After a brief moment, the guildmaster gave his response. He agreed. The instant she heard that, Rhea removed her hood and revealed her face, saying that she knew he would accept. And that was the moment the guildmaster was truly shocked. Then, without wasting another second, Rhea moved straight to the next step and declared that they should write up the contract right away. Rhea immediately pushed to finalize the deal, insisting that the contract be signed right away. When she pulled down her hood, the guildmaster was visibly taken aback, stunned by the revelation that the person standing before him was merely a child. Rhea noticed his shock and warned him not to spread rumors about her identity unless he was prepared to pay a heavy penalty. The guildmaster remained silent, clearly still processing the situation. Rhea, slightly annoyed, wondered inwardly if she wasn't even allowed to make a joke as a business partner. She moved the discussion forward and set her terms. Starting from the down payment, she wanted to be paid in jewels until the final settlement so she could prepare the next batch of goods. She also made it clear that she could not leave the house often, and therefore expected the guild to avoid anything obvious, no suspicious deliveries or attention. The guildmaster agreed, assuring her that everything would be delivered discreetly. He then tossed her a communication artifact, instructing her to keep it for emergencies before ordering her to sign the contract. Rhea signed without hesitation, stated that it had been a pleasure doing business, and prepared to leave. But before she could go, the guildmaster attempted to speak again. Rhea cut him off immediately. She warned him not to waste time trying to follow her because no matter how much he investigated, he would find nothing. She insisted she was nothing more than an ordinary maid and left with a firm expectation of future cooperation. As the door closed behind her, the guildmaster began to speak again, questioning where the information had come from. Then he removed his earring. The magical disguise faded, revealing that the guildmaster had actually been Lucio all along. Inwardly, Lucio was not only puzzled about how Rhea had gained access to the guild's VIP code and confidential information, but also deeply intrigued by her presence there at all. Even more astonishing was the fact that she could produce mana stones of such quality despite never having received formal magical training. With a slight smile, he recalled her earlier declaration that she could leave any time she wanted, and he wondered whether she still clung to that naive belief that she could simply walk away whenever she pleased. Lucio then addressed his attendant, instructing him not to pursue her as she had requested. Instead, he ordered him to contact Heron and inform him that the guild finally had work to do and that things were about to become busy. He also commanded that everything that happened today remained strictly confidential. From that moment on, he would personally oversee the matter. When questioned about handling it personally, Lucio affirmed his decision without hesitation. There was no one more suited than he to frequent the Ellard Duchy. Rhea walked through the alleyway, still shaken by the unexpected encounter with the guildmaster. She couldn't believe she had actually met him in person. Things were moving faster because of it, but the whole situation had happened too suddenly. She had encountered his subordinates before, but never the man himself. His presence had been unmistakable. He was no ordinary person. She thought back to the password she used to gain entry, realizing it was mint chocolate cake. and wondered if that was the guildmaster's preference. Then she remembered the faint scent of mint in the room and couldn't help but think of the library where Lucio used to stay. The connection flustered her, and she immediately scolded herself for thinking about him at a time like this. Her thoughts shifted to money. She was on the verge of becoming wealthy. With the earnings from Splesia and careful reinvestment, she could build an enormous fortune. New business ideas already filled her head, and the future felt full of potential. While walking along the street, she heard her name called. Jack spotted her and waved. Rhea approached him, apologizing for taking so long and preparing to head back. But the moment she looked past him, everything else vanished from her awareness. There, among the crowd, stood someone who looked exactly like her former master. Her breath caught. Her mind froze. She couldn't think. She simply moved. Ignoring Jack's question about whether she had finished her business, she rushed forward, calling out desperately and trying to reach the figure before he disappeared. But in her rush, she stepped directly into the path of an oncoming carriage. Jack reacted instantly. He grabbed her and pulled her back just in time, preventing a collision that could have been fatal. Shaken, Jack demanded to know why she had run into the street like that. Rhea didn't know what to say. She didn't understand why she had chased after him or what she had even hoped to do if she reached him. Even if that man truly was her master, what could she have done? What could she have said? She finally answered weakly, explaining that she thought she saw someone she knew, but admitted she must have been mistaken. Without looking back again, she suggested they return to the duchy. Jack agreed, and they left the street behind. On the other side of the street, a girl walked forward towards her master, noting that the atmosphere within the guild had become unusually tense. She recalled how, not long ago, Jade had been removed without any clear explanation. The memory of that day resurfaced vividly. Back then, she had tried to question the decision, but her inquiry was dismissed outright. The master had made it clear that explanations were not his concern and ordered them to follow instructions without question. In response, the two subordinates had bowed and accepted the command without protest, while the others around them remained silent and uneasy. Now, reflecting on that exchange, one of the followers murmured that the master seemed far more agitated than usual. The girl agreed, her worry deepening as she wondered if something serious had happened behind the scenes, something they were not being told. A month had passed, and at the Ellard Duchy, the atmosphere inside Dana's room was light and warm. Rhea stood behind her, carefully combing her hair, her movements gentle and practiced. Dana quickly noticed the change in her and pointed out how unusually cheerful she seemed. Rhea responded that every day felt wonderful when she was with her lady, but deep inside, she knew there was more to it. At last, she had received the payment from her very first jewelry sale. In her thoughts, everything unfolded clearly. The Duchy of Valus, known for owning the largest magic stone mine on the continent, had strictly limited exports. Because of that, magic stones had become incredibly scarce, so rare that even wealth alone could not secure them. In the middle of that scarcity, the Delhi's merchant group, still considered newcomers, had suddenly entered the market with high-quality magic stones sold at unprecedented prices. The result had been explosive. Demand surged, and the entire market was thrown into a frenzy. It had turned into a once-in-a-lifetime success. Rhea had expected them to perform well since higher prices meant higher profit for the group, but even she had not anticipated results of this scale. And beyond that, she had already handed the Duke a separate list of investments. Now, all that remained was to wait and watch the wealth accumulate. At this rate, she even imagined becoming the richest person in the empire. In that future, she would buy a castle, invite Diana, and surround her with the finest food and comfort imaginable. Finishing her work, Rhea announced that Diana's hair was done. As Diana looked into the mirror, her beauty stood out, and Rhea couldn't help but admire how adorable she was. In return, Diana declared that Rhea was the prettiest in the world. Their moment was interrupted when Alan entered the room, observing how lively they seemed. Rhea immediately teased him, suggesting that he was sulking because he could not accompany Diana to the imperial palace that day. Diana quickly joined in, insisting that he was indeed pouting. Alan denied it outright, clearly irritated at the accusation. At that moment, the Duke stepped in, questioning why Alan was starting an argument again. Alan protested, insisting he wasn't picking a fight. The Duchess, however, dismissed him as immature. Ria's attention shifted as she noticed something off about the Duchess and asked if she was all right. The Duchess admitted she hadn't slept well but insisted she was fine. The Duke gently reminded her that she didn't have to attend if she wasn't feeling well. Still, she refused to back down, stating that she could not possibly miss a day like this. In that moment, Ria's thoughts quietly drifted, piecing together the significance of the day. Even the Duchess could not simply choose to stay behind. It was the Empress's birthday, a day that carried far more weight than celebration. Just the day before marked the anniversary of the former Duke and Duchess of Paylunt's deaths, the Empress's own parents. Long ago, when she had still been the Lady of Paylunt, they had been on their way to the capital to celebrate her birthday when their carriage met a tragic accident. Since then, what should have been a joyful occasion had become a day of mourning. The grand birthday banquet had been replaced by a tea gathering. Yet, despite its quieter form, it remained an event no noblewoman or young lady in the capital could afford to miss. The Duke, watching the Duchess closely, urged her to stop being stubborn and rest instead, reminding her that Her Majesty had seemed quite fond of her during their last meeting. The Duchess, however, did not accept that sentiment so easily, recalling how tense the atmosphere had truly been. The Duke brushed it off as relatively pleasant, though he admitted it had turned awkward when it became clear that Lucio had not attended. He began to mention the princess, but was quickly cut off, the Duchess putting an end to what she considered unnecessary remarks. At that point, Ria carefully stepped in, asking whether the young master had truly missed the previous imperial banquet. The Duchess confirmed it, explaining that Lucio had not come, likely due to exhaustion from his academy responsibilities. His condition had been such that even returning home had been difficult, making attendance at the imperial palace impossible. Ria fell silent after hearing that. And in her mind, a realization settled in. On the very day she had gone out, Lucio had not gone to the imperial palace at all. Inside the headquarters of Daryl, Lucio sat quietly at his desk, reviewing documents with his usual composure. The room was calm, almost too calm, until a sudden unsettling feeling crept into his mind. It was sharp and familiar, an ominous sign that something disruptive was about to happen. Before the thought could settle, the door burst open. A man in a coat stormed in without restraint, immediately demanding answers. He advanced straight to the desk and slammed his hand down, insisting that Lucio tell him what he wanted to know. His curiosity had clearly reached a breaking point, leaving him restless and unable to sleep. Lucio, recognizing the source of the disturbance, simply acknowledged it inwardly. So this was the cause. The man moved away and dropped onto the sofa, pressing the question again, demanding to know who had sold the magic stones. He insisted on an answer, but Lucio remained firm, calmly stating that the information could not be disclosed, even to someone of such high standing. The man, revealed to be a prince, reacted with irritation, remarking that Lucio had truly become quite the businessman. Unbothered, Lucio shifted the conversation, asking why the prince had not stayed at the imperial palace. The prince explained that he had gone, but only briefly. He had shown his face and left, just as he always did. There was a hint of bitterness as he questioned whether Her Majesty would even want to see him on her birthday. In the end, he admitted that his presence was merely to maintain appearances as a member of the imperial family. Then, catching on, he suddenly accused Lucio of skillfully changing the subject. Lucio answered simply, saying it was only out of curiosity. The prince found that suspicious, pointing out that Lucio had never shown such interest before. Then, as if recalling something important, the prince mentioned that the Duchess of Ellard and the youngest lady had also attended the palace that day. He noted how the young lady resembled Lucio closely, yet was undeniably adorable. Then his attention shifted to a maid. He spoke of her unexpectedly, describing how she lingered in his thoughts, praising her capability despite her first impression. At the mention of the maid, something in Lucio changed. A quiet unease stirred within him. Without hesitation, he snapped his fingers. In an instant, one of his subordinates appeared, teleporting into the room and grabbing the prince. Before the prince could react, he was being dragged out forcefully. Caught off guard, the prince clung to the doorframe, protesting loudly, questioning whether this was truly how a prince should be treated. Realizing too late what had triggered this reaction, he quickly tried to correct himself, loudly declaring that Lucio's sister was the cutest, even going so far as to compare her favorably to the maid and every princess. But his words changed nothing. A short while earlier, inside the imperial castle, Ria found herself standing in a place she never imagined she would enter again. The grandeur of the palace surrounded her, and the reality of it all settled heavily in her thoughts. She had truly come to the imperial palace. Beside her, Dana's attention suddenly shifted, her eyes lighting up with excitement as she noticed a group approaching. She pointed them out with clear fascination, recognizing them as princesses. At once, the Duchess and Ria lowered their heads in respect. The Duchess quietly corrected Diana, reminding her that these were not just ordinary princesses, but imperial princesses, figures of far greater status and significance. As Ria kept her head lowered, her thoughts began to race. She recalled what she had heard about them, that they were rarely seen outside, almost as if they were confined within the palace walls. Yet today was different. Because it was the Empress's birthday, they had all come out to pay their respects. When she finally allowed herself to observe them, the sight was striking. There were more than 20 imperial princesses, each one bearing the same distinct feature: pink hair. They appeared noble, elegant, and almost unreal in their beauty. But Ria's thoughts did not settle on admiration. Instead, they drifted somewhere darker. She remembered the rumors from her past life, whispers that spread quietly but persistently. It was said that if the emperor ever saw a woman with pink hair, he would take her. And if that woman happened to be of noble birth, she would later become one of his consorts. Those stories had once filled her with fear. And now, standing there among them, a strange and unsettling thought crossed her mind. It came uninvited, yet impossible to ignore. For a brief moment, she wondered if it was possible. Could she be one of them? An imperial princess who had somehow been secretly taken out of the palace? Ria's attention shifted when she noticed the Duchess quietly coughing. Concern immediately surfaced, and she checked on her condition. The Duchess, however, reassured her with a gentle smile, insisting it was nothing more than a lingering cough even after having tea. Despite it, she urged them to move quickly, reminding them that the Empress was waiting. Not long after, they arrived at the Imperial Garden, where the gathering was being held. The Empress acknowledged their arrival at once, addressing the Duchess of Ellard with calm authority. The Duchess responded with proper decorum, offering a respectful greeting before being invited to take a seat nearby. Among those present, an imperial princess recognized Dana and greeted her warmly, asking if she had been well. Dana responded simply, but the moment did not remain peaceful for long. The princess's attention shifted. Her gaze landed on Ria. With deliberate intent, she let a knife slip from her hand, allowing it to fall to the ground. Her expression carried a faint, knowing smile, as if waiting for something to happen. Ria immediately understood. This was no accident. The act was meant to force her into a position of submission, to make her bow. Though they had never met before, the hostility was clear. Ria suppressed her thoughts, deciding that for now, compliance was the safest path. She began to move to pick up the knife. But before she could, Dana rushed forward and grabbed it first. With innocent sincerity, Dana handed it back to the princess. The princess accepted it, acknowledging Dana politely, but her gaze quickly returned to Ria. There was a subtle sharpness in her words as she pointed out that while her mistress had bent down, Ria had remained standing. Understanding the situation, Ria lowered herself into a respectful bow and admitted fault. Internally, she reminded herself to remain cautious. Any misstep here could bring unnecessary trouble to the ducal house. Staying quiet and composed was the only option. The tension in the air gradually shifted as other guests began speaking. A noblewoman brought up news of an engagement, offering congratulations to Lady Ferial, who accepted them graciously. The conversation flowed naturally into another topic, this time focusing on the imperial princess herself, who would soon come of age, yet remained without a fiancé. Then the attention turned again, this time toward Dana. A young lady from the Amber Count house introduced herself and began speaking about Lucio. She highlighted his achievements, mentioning his consistent top ranking at the academy and his early graduation. With his future responsibilities approaching, she suggested that it would be more stable for him to have a partner. Dana, caught off guard, could only respond with confusion. The meaning of the question had not yet fully reached her, but the implication lingered clearly in the air. The conversation had shifted toward Lucio's future marriage. The conversation in the Imperial Garden continued, and attention soon returned to Dana. The princess gently directed a question toward her, asking what kind of person her brother should marry and what kind of sister-in-law she would like. Dana paused to think. Then, with a bright and innocent smile, she answered that she liked someone like Unnie. The response caused an immediate reaction. Rhea was visibly shaken the moment she heard it, while one of the noble ladies quickly corrected Dinah, reminding her that she should not address a princess in such a familiar way. Dana fell silent, caught in confusion. The princess, however, chose not to take offense. Instead, she allowed it, saying the young lady was still a child and interpreting the remark as a sign of closeness. Dinah, now even more confused, could only react uncertainly. But in Rhea's mind, the meaning behind Dana's words was clear. The Unnie she referred to was not the princess. Before the thought could settle further, another voice entered the gathering. The Duchess of Payraunt arrived, offering her apology for being late and greeting those present. As her gaze moved across the group, she suddenly spotted Rhea. Her expression brightened instantly as she approached her with clear affection, calling her cute and clever. She excitedly mentioned that a gift would be waiting for her back at the ducal house. Rhea, surprised, questioned it. The Duchess of Payraunt explained that it was a dessert from the kingdom of Duhamba, something Aiden had woken up early to prepare. It was described as a rare delicacy, something that could only be tasted at the Payraunt ducal house within the empire. This warm exchange did not go unnoticed. The Empress observed the interaction and pointed out how frequently the Duchess of Payraunt had been visiting the Ellard estate, questioning whether she had grown close to a mere maid. The Duchess of Payraunt responded without hesitation, affirming the closeness but correcting the assumption. Rhea, she explained, was no ordinary maid. She was the one who pioneered the cultivation of Splencia. That revelation stirred the gathering. Other noblewomen began to speak, recognizing the name. Splencia was known as a legendary medicinal herb, rumored to cure any disease. The idea that such a thing truly existed drew amazement, and soon admiration followed. They spoke of Rhea's brilliance despite her young age, praising not only her talent but her charm as well. As the attention around Rhea grew, another reaction quietly unfolded. Dana, watching from the side, became visibly displeased as the Duchess of Payraunt continued to hold on to Rhea. Unable to hide her feelings any longer, she suddenly stood up and announced that she needed to go to the bathroom. Rhea immediately responded, offering to step out with her. The Duchess of Payraunt allowed it, telling Rhea to go ahead and return afterward. Inside the imperial castle, Rhea and Diana stepped away toward the bathroom, walking side by side through the long corridors. Rhea gently reminded her to be careful, noting that her dress was longer than usual. Dana responded brightly, her voice full of ease and cheer. As they walked, Rhea's thoughts lingered on what had just happened. Because of the Duchess of Payraunt, the gazes directed at her had softened, if only slightly. And yet one thing continued to trouble her. Why had Serphin shown such wariness toward her? It felt strange that someone of the princess's status would even be aware of her existence. The thought lingered uneasily. Unable to ignore it, Rhea carefully asked Dana if, during her previous visit to the imperial palace, she had ever mentioned her. Dana quickly denied it, explaining that she had avoided talking about her sister to people she found frightening. But then she brought up Alan. Rhea immediately reacted inwardly, bracing herself, wondering what he might have said this time. Dana explained that Alan had praised her. He had spoken about how smart she was, how she read difficult books, and how Lucio had given her a library key and instructed her to study diligently. That was enough. Rhea fell silent, but her thoughts began to piece everything together. It became clear to her what had likely happened. Serfin's interest lay with Lucio. Becoming a duchess was not the end goal. Her true ambition was far greater. As the direct heir of the emperor and empress, she aimed for the position of empress, someone who would wield strong imperial authority. For that, her future consort needed to be someone capable of granting her immense power. Whether that desire came purely from ambition or held even a trace of something more, Rhea could not yet tell. But one thing was certain. Alan's careless words had made her stand out. To someone like Serfin, Rhea had become a nuisance. Just a maid, favored by the younger sister. As they made their way back toward the gathering, the calm atmosphere shifted abruptly. Voices rose ahead of them, urgent and alarmed. Someone called for a physician immediately. Another voice demanded to know what was happening. Rhea's steps quickened as unease gripped her. In her mind, questions surfaced rapidly. What had happened? Had someone fallen ill? Then she saw it. Her gaze landed on the Duchess, and in that instant, everything else faded. Horror took over as Rhea rushed forward, calling out to her. Back at the Ellard Duchy, the atmosphere had completely changed. Tension filled the estate as urgency and fear spread among everyone present. The Duke's anger broke through the chaos as he demanded answers, pressing the mages to explain why they still could not determine the cause. His voice carried both authority and desperation as he ordered them to find out immediately whether it was an illness or poison, then corrected himself. What mattered most was making sure she woke up first. The mages could only respond with reassurance, promising to do everything they could. Amid the confusion, Diana's quiet sobs grew into uncontrollable crying. The Duke moved to her side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder as he tried to calm her, reminding her that her mother was strong and would never leave them behind. Then his gaze shifted. He noticed Rhea standing at a distance. She looked shaken, her composure completely gone, her emotions written clearly across her face. He called for her to come closer. But before she could respond, she turned and ran. The Duke called out after her, but she didn't stop. Rhea fled the room, her vision blurred with tears as her thoughts spiraled. She had believed she could protect the Duchess. It hadn't just been a promise, she truly believed in it. And yet she had failed. She kept running until she reached the base of a tree, where her steps finally halted. The weight of helplessness pressed down on her. In that moment, she compared herself to who she once was, a powerless beggar struggling to survive. And the difference felt non-existent. Frustration surged. She struck her own cheek, forcing herself back to reality. There was no time to break down. She steadied her breathing and began to think. This couldn't be something as simple as stress. The Duchess had shown no signs of being socially pressured or mistreated. If anything, her growing closeness with the Duchess of Payraunt had removed any sense of isolation she might have had. That left only one possibility. An illness. But even that didn't sit right. The Duchess had always been strong, rarely ever falling sick. Still, a detail surfaced in her memory. Just the day before, the Duchess had mentioned tightness in her chest and difficulty sleeping. Another memory followed. At the Imperial Castle, there had been that moment, the Duchess clutching her chest, struggling to breathe before collapsing. The pattern began to form. The symptoms resembled heart disease, but something about it felt wrong. There was still something missing, and that was what Rhea needed to confirm. Rhea's thoughts were cut short the moment she saw the doctor hurrying toward the castle. Without hesitation, she called out and rushed to him. The doctor stopped, surprised to see her there instead of by Dana's side. He questioned why she had come, but Rhea didn't hesitate. She insisted that she wanted to help, that she wanted to stay by the Duchess's side and take care of her. In her heart, she already knew how this would sound, like a child acting out, driven by emotion. But this wasn't that. She needed to see it herself. The doctor tried to reason with her, warning that such devotion would only exhaust her and bring her pain. But Rhea didn't waver. She told him she didn't care, that he should just let her do it. For a brief moment, the doctor fell silent, weighing her determination. Then he agreed. They hurried inside together. The tension in the room was suffocating the moment Rhea stepped in. The mages had already reached their conclusion, and one of them spoke with grim finality, saying preparations should be made for the worst. The Duke's fury erupted instantly, his voice cutting through the air as he ordered him to be silent. Then another voice called out to him. He turned and saw Rhea. The Duke immediately dismissed everyone else from the room, clearing the space. Once they were alone, he questioned her presence, telling her that he understood how she felt, but that she should be with Dana instead. But Rhea shook her head. She apologized, but made it clear. This wasn't stubbornness. There was something she needed to confirm. The Duke pressed her, asking what she meant. Rhea stepped forward, her expression steady despite everything. She pointed out the current situation. Neither the priests nor the mages had been able to cure the Duchess. Most likely, they had already used holy power to temporarily boost her vitality, slowing the deterioration. Then she explained further. Holy power at its core was a form of life force. Its effectiveness depended on the patient's own vitality. For someone healthy, it could produce miraculous healing. But for someone already weakened, whether by long-term illness or a strong poison, it would do little more than provide a temporary surge of energy. Nothing more than a delay. Rhea's voice steadied as her thoughts aligned into certainty. She stated that the Duchess had always been healthy, never showing any signs of underlying illness. There was no reason for her condition to suddenly deteriorate like this. To Rhea, the conclusion became unavoidable. This was poison. The words struck the Duke instantly. Shock and fear flashed across his face as the possibility took hold. The doctor quickly responded, pointing out that no traces of poison had been found in her body. Every examination had come up clean. But Rhea didn't back down. She raised a possibility that had not been considered, that the poison might be something undetectable through standard methods. That gave the doctor pause, but doubt still lingered. He questioned how she could be so certain, especially without concrete evidence. Rhea pressed forward. She challenged the hesitation itself, pointing out that they were already in a situation where the cause remained unknown. Waiting without acting would only waste time. More importantly, she revealed that she had a way to confirm whether the Duchess had truly been poisoned. This time, the reaction was immediate. The doctor was visibly shaken by her confidence. The Duke stepped in, his tone serious, demanding to know what method she was referring to. And without wavering, Rhea gave her answer. It was splensia. Rhea stood firm despite the pressure surrounding her. She declared that she could do it, that she could grow the splensia to its full potential and process it into medicine with maximum effectiveness. Even she admitted she could not properly explain how she possessed such knowledge, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was saving the Duchess. Clenching her fists tightly, Rhea begged for trust just this once. The Duke fell silent. For a long moment he closed his eyes and thought carefully. Then, at last, he made his decision. He declared that he would trust her, because he was certain his wife would have done the same. Relief washed over Rhea immediately. She thanked him with determination burning in her eyes, silently vowing that she would repay that trust no matter what. From that moment on, she devoted herself entirely to creating the antidote. The room became a flurry of movement as Rhea worked nonstop. She urgently called for more sealant roots, and the doctor quickly responded, asking if there was anything else she needed. But Rhea shook her head, saying that was enough for now. The doctor could only stare at her in disbelief. It was astonishing watching someone so young handle such work. The memory from earlier still lingered vividly in her mind. The moment Rhea controlled her mana and forced the splensia to bloom before her eyes. It had felt unreal, like witnessing a dream. Rhea called for the doctor again, snapping her back to reality, and the ingredients were quickly handed over. As Ria poured them into the container, anxiety gnawed at her thoughts. She had believed creating the antidote would be simple because she had done it before in her previous life. But the splensia from the greenhouse, even the ones cultivated using magic stones, had all failed. And every second mattered. Desperately, she prayed for this antidote to work and for the Duchess to recover safely. As she stirred the medicine, an old memory suddenly resurfaced. She remembered handing a vial to her master in the past. Then came another painful image. The same medicine discarded, shattered inside a trash bin. The memory shook her deeply. By the time she returned to the present, the doctor had already called her name several times. Ria looked down in alarm and realized she had nearly dropped the medicine in her hands. The doctor immediately noticed her exhaustion. After days without proper sleep and constant mana usage, her body had clearly reached its limit. She advised Ria to rest, explaining that the antidote would take several hours before any results could be seen. Ria quietly agreed, but instead of resting, she said she would go outside for some fresh air. As Ria walked in the corridor, she noticed Taze guarding the front of the Duchess's room. He asked if she had been making the antidote until this late hour, and Ria answered yes before asking if she could check on the Duchess before leaving. Taze allowed her to enter. When Ria opened the door, she saw Alan and Dana asleep near the Duchess. She quietly approached Dana, and in her thoughts she wished the situation had been better so she could have offered her warmer words. Then she remembered her earlier conversation with the Duke and the doctor. Ria had asked them to keep secret the fact that she would be testing for poison using splensia and crafting an antidote. She explained that if the Duchess had truly been poisoned, then there had to be a culprit behind the assassination attempt. If rumors about the antidote spread, there was no telling how the culprit might react. They could grow anxious and suddenly take action. The Duke had suggested that making the culprit anxious enough to move on their own might be more certain, but Ria disagreed. She explained that if the culprit still chose not to move, they would gain nothing. Since no one could even tell when the Duchess had first been exposed to the poison, the culprit had to be someone extremely cautious and careful. Rather than hoping they would make another move, it would be better to let them lower their guard. Back in the present, Ria wondered if Dana and Alan would feel hurt if they learned she had kept this secret from them. After quietly leaving the room and closing the door, Ria continued walking through the corridor. In her mind, she told herself that it could not be helped. The fastest way to make the two of them happy again would be to finish making the antidote. Ria noticed a shadow at the corner of the corridor. Horror ran through her mind as the thought formed that it might be a person, especially at such a late hour near the Duchess's bedroom. The Duke had not yet returned from the Imperial Palace, and she had just met Taze at the door. The conclusion followed quickly. The owner of that shadow might be the culprit. She walked cautiously toward the corner, her steps careful, and called out for whoever was there. The figure revealed itself, and it was Lucio. Shock overtook her as she realized it was the young master, her thoughts racing over when he could have returned. She admitted that he had startled her and questioned why he was standing there like that, explaining that she had thought it was someone else. Lucio answered by questioning whether she was pretending not to know or truly unaware. With a serious expression, he reached out and lifted her chin. Ria was left shocked. His hand then moved to touch her face. She became startled and speechless. Lucio then questioned whether she even slept while working. Ria was completely overwhelmed, unable to understand what was happening in that moment. Lucio then said he supposed he couldn't even tell her to take it easy. Ria quickly reassured him that she was fine and that this was what she wanted to do, realizing in her mind that he was only worrying about her because of the antidote. Lucio still told her not to overdo it, adding that the Duchess would not want that either. Ria insisted that she was already doing just that. Lucio smiled faintly and called her a liar, but said it was fine as long as she wasn't going anywhere. Confused, Ria asked where she would even go. Lucio reacted with shock for a moment, then smiled and told her to stay by his side from now on and not even think about leaving without his permission. Rhea felt a strange tension rising in her chest as she wondered why she was suddenly breaking into a cold sweat. She then asked if he was going to see the Duchess since it was already so late. Lucio replied that he had come there to see her. Rhea was confused and asked if he meant her. Lucio then handed her chocolate, telling her to eat it while working since she must be tired, mentioning that Alan had said she liked chocolate. Rhea thought to herself that rumors had spread that she was obsessed with chocolate. Still, she thanked him and ate it. The taste surprised her, and she admitted in her thoughts that it was delicious. Then she shook her head as if trying to push something away. Lucio noticed and asked if something was wrong or if it didn't taste good. Rhea answered that it wasn't that, it just reminded her of the past. Rhea quietly thanked Lucio, acknowledging that the chocolate was delicious, and in her thoughts she lingered briefly on the feeling that it reminded her of the past and even the present. Lucio then mentioned that the Duchess must have been the one who gave it to her, adding that he himself used to eat it often when he was a child. After that, Rhea bowed politely and said she must be going, explaining that the medicine was not finished yet. She then turned around and walked away. Lucio simply watched her leave, remaining silent and speechless. In Lucio's thoughts, he recalled how, ever since that child had visited Daryl, he had begun thoroughly investigating the guild's security in order to uncover where the information leak had come from. Even after re-examining everything, including the orphanage she had once stayed at, not a single clue could be found. At the same time, he remembered how news reached him that his mother had collapsed at the Imperial Palace and how, almost simultaneously, an urgent message arrived from his business partner. The letter stated that Mana Stone production would have to be suspended for the time being, offering an apology for breaking their promise and a vague assurance of compensation later. In his thoughts, he reflected on how absurd it was that such a contract update had arrived at the same time his mother's condition worsened, even finding himself remarking inwardly that the sender was quite the merchant, perhaps even more so than himself. Yet when he returned home, he discovered something he had never anticipated. The one staying up through the night to create medicine for his mother was that very child. He admitted in his thoughts that he never expected this at all, and even wondered if this child, who seemed to see through everything, might also know his true identity. But when he finally faced her directly, all his tangled thoughts disappeared, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe again. He concluded inwardly that things like secrets or hidden intentions no longer seemed to matter. The next day arrived. Inside the Duchess's room, the doctor carefully gave the antidote Rhea had created to the Duchess. As Rhea and the doctor waited nervously, Rhea thought to herself that she had finally succeeded in creating the perfect antidote. Then the doctor suddenly reacted in shock. The Duchess's complexion was beginning to return slightly, and even her pulse had stabilized. Rhea immediately told the Duke that the Duchess would regain consciousness soon. At that moment, the Duke realized what this meant. Rhea then pointed out that the medicinal effects of Splencia had worked on the Duchess, which could only mean one thing. The Duke clenched his hands tightly and acknowledged it. Someone had truly tried to poison Adele. He then revealed that, just as Rhea had requested, he had ensured everyone remained silent for now. The Duchess's improving condition would also remain completely confidential until the culprit was caught. But the Duke declared with certainty that he would absolutely catch the person responsible before the Duchess fully recovered, especially because the children missed their mother dearly. Rhea quietly listened in silence. As she watched the Duke and the doctor continue discussing the matter, she thought to herself that her role was finished now. Going any further would no longer be her place. Uncovering the culprit was something that should be left to the Duke. For now, all she could do was trust him. Inside Rhea's room, she slowly opened her eyes before sitting up, realizing that she had accidentally fallen asleep. As she looked toward the window, uneasy thoughts filled her mind. Although she was relieved that the Duchess had been saved, something still felt unsettling to her. She realized it was because she had not revealed the information she knew. The moment it became certain that the Duchess had been poisoned, Rhea had immediately recognized the poison's identity. It was Leiden. a poison extracted from a marine animal from the southern continent. It was colorless, odorless, and appeared no different from water to the naked eye. It mimicked heart disease by causing chest pain and difficulty breathing before eventually inducing a heart attack, all while leaving behind absolutely no trace. Worse still, it inflicted agonizing pain on its victims. Rhea knew it as a poison secretly smuggled by the Dark Guild for assassinations and conspiracies, but she never expected it had already entered the Empire. Then Rhea opened her drawer and took out the magic communication item given to her by Daryl. In her thoughts, she concluded that if she wanted to track down the person who purchased the poison from the Dark Guild, she would have to borrow the Guild Master of Daryl's power for a moment. Activating the artifact with mana, she sent an urgent request and asked for him to come as quickly as possible. Afterward, she let out a quiet sigh, thinking about how difficult it was to activate the communication artifact properly with mana. Since it was still within the Information Guild's operating hours, she assumed they would check the message quickly, but she still wondered how long it would take for him to arrive. Ideally, she hoped it would happen before sunrise. Then, suddenly, Rhea noticed the communication artifact glowing. Confused, she stared at it for a moment. Before she could process what was happening, someone knocked on her window. When she looked over, she saw the Guildmaster of Daryl, who was actually Lucio in disguise, already sitting there in her window. He greeted her casually, saying that he had come right away.
Hi, this is Winter. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Winter Manhwa for more exciting recaps every week. Your support means the world. See you in the next one.